Folks, if you've been here since 6:30 waiting for me to come and do this live stream, I am really sorry. I posted it on my personal page, Pastor Walt, so all the prayer time is there and previous verses. I'm sorry, that's on me. Jerry and I were talking about stuff and I wasn't paying close attention, and I'm sorry. That's why people aren't looking or watching and checking in tonight. They found it because they found me. Hopefully you can get back over to this live stream now. I really apologize. I really apologize. We're in Mark chapter 8, and Jesus has told his disciples to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, Is it because we have no bread? Verse 17. But Jesus, being aware of it, said to them, Why do you reason because you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive nor understand? Is your heart still hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember the problems that I'm having with Herod, the problems that I'm having with the Pharisees? Are you not understanding what I'm talking about when I say beware of what they teach, beware of how they live? It's not because you don't have bread. When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of fragments did you take up? And they said to him, 12. Also, when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large baskets full of fragments did you take up? And they said, 7. Verse 21, So he said to them, How is it you do not understand? Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, beware of the leaven of Herod, because it will change what you believe about Jesus. We need to be careful about religious leaven. Remember, religion is man's idea of how to get to God. God wants you to have a relationship. He wants to be a spiritual position. And so religion can get in the way of us having a relationship with Jesus Christ. Not only that, but Herod's problem with leaven would be his physical satisfaction and his living a very physical lifestyle and hedonistic. And Jesus knows that that can wreck the Christian's lifestyle as well, where we become so set on physical pleasures that we forget to live for the Lord. And so he was trying to help the disciples to understand. This what he was saying was not about food, but it was about how those would affect their lifestyles as a believer. All right, verse number 22. Then he came to Bethsaida, and they brought a blind man to him and begged him to touch him. So he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes and put his hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything. Many times in the scriptures, we see that when the blind or the lame or the deaf are aware that they approach Jesus, the lepers approach Jesus. There's the story of blind Bartimaeus who goes to Jesus and says, I know you can heal me, and the leper that comes to Jesus. Well, here in this situation, they bring a blind man out of the town. He doesn't have anybody to guide him, and so they guide him to Jesus in the town and say, can you touch him and heal him? And the difficulties that are seen here is because of this man's belief, I believe. Because he's a little confused about what's going on. Okay? He may not have heard of Jesus. He may not have been aware of what Jesus could do. But others do, and so they bring him out and they beg Jesus to touch him. And he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of town. When he had spit on his eyes and put his hands on him, he asked him if he saw anything. Do you see anything? And he looked up and said, I see men like trees walking. What? Jesus didn't heal him totally right away? Well, Jesus is testing his faith. Okay? Mm-hmm. Jesus is testing his faith. This man doesn't quite know yet that he's talking to the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, to Jesus. And he wants to see what his faith is going to do. And this is sort of controversial because of how Jesus deals with this. And Jesus he heals everybody else right away. But again, I don't believe this man really understood who Jesus was. But he realized, okay, this man can change me. Because I couldn't see anything, and now I can just see things sort of dimly. Okay, now I believe. Then he put his hands on his eyes again and made him look up. And he was restored and saw everyone clearly. So now the man believes because of the small thing that Jesus does to help him with his vision. And now he can see clearly. Again, I want to apologize for not having the live stream in the right place tonight. Please, if you have any prayer requests or answers to prayer, put them in the comments there on the side of your screen so that as I close this out tonight, we can remember to pray for them. I apologize. Please, please, please. I didn't have my technician here, Michi, who always makes sure we're on the right live stream, to make sure we were on the right live stream. I appreciate you, Michi, and all that you do. So, the blind man is healed and can see everybody clearly. Verse 26. Then he, Jesus, sent him, the blind man, away to his house, saying, neither go into the town, nor tell anyone in the town. Well, they'll figure it out pretty quick. When the guy who's been in Bethsaida asking for alms for the poor, for the blind, asking for support financially, is up walking around town like, he can see. They're going to figure out something's happened. Especially those people that we saw a minute ago that brought the blind man out there. They're going to figure out something happened. We're not stupid, right? We get a hold of things. We can grasp concepts pretty quick. Verse 27. Now Jesus and his disciples went out to the towns of Caesarea Philippi. Caesarea Philippi was a cosmopolitan town that was been built by Herod, one of the Herods, and it has been excavated, and it had like a place for racing, like the Romans like to do, like a small Colosseum. It had a place that it was very, very Gentile. I say cosmopolitan. There wasn't a lot of evidences of Jewish religion there. There was evidences perhaps of the Greek or Roman religion, but not much of Jewish religion. But Jesus slips his way to go there every now and then. And so as they're on the road, he asked his disciples, saying to them, who do men say that I am? What have you heard people say about me as to who I am? Well, they answered, verse 28, some say you're John the Baptist. Herod thought that. But some say Elijah, because Elijah was the one that preceded the Messiah. And others, oh, he's just one of the prophets. Because they had heard what the prophets could do, the miracles of Elijah and Elisha and some of those things. They had heard those things. Well, they're not thinking of him being the Messiah because, remember, King of the Jews, but where's he born? In Bethlehem. Where's he placed? In a manger. How does he grow up? As the King of Kings? No, he grows up as a carpenter in Nazareth. And then he begins his ministry, and he's not blowing everybody away and chasing the Romans out and taking over everything. He's just ministering the way that he's supposed to, according to the Old Testament. But they would always just see the highlights and see that he's King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and he's going to take over. So that's why people weren't catching exactly who he was. Just the general public. But, verse 29, he said to them, but who do you say that I am? Who do you think that I am? Peter answered and said to him, you are the Christ. Remember, Christ is not Jesus' last name. It's his title. Christ is the Greek representation for the word Messiah. And so when we say he is the Christ, or Peter here says you are the Christ, they're saying you're the Messiah. We know you're the one that's supposed to come. We know that you're the one that's been promised. You're the Messiah. Verse 30, then he strictly warned them that they should tell no one about him. Now, later, Jesus will send them out in groups to go out and to preach the gospel, to go out and to talk about him. But here, he's just sort of saying we're keeping this quiet for right now. He knows that the disciples are not totally learned. Even his own brothers tried to get him to go up to Jerusalem at the feast and sort of proclaim his kingship so they could be in a position of authority. And we know that John and James and their mom hatch up this scheme to get John on one side of Jesus' throne and James on the other side of the throne. And Jesus helps them to understand that's not what this means as Messiah. And so Jesus has to continually train his disciples on these things. Verse number 31. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. So he begins to tell them what's going to happen on a Passover in the near future. And again, this is not what they're looking for as a nation. They want a king to come in and chase out the Romans and set them up in a position of having a kingdom again. But Jesus starts his kingdom in the hearts of man. And so he says, there's going to be some bad days ahead, and I'm going to be rejected, and I'm going to suffer, and I'm going to be killed, and I'm going to rise again after 3 days. He spoke this word openly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. I can just see Peter. Jesus, come here. I got to talk to you. I got to talk to you. You got to stop with this suffering and dying thing. They didn't catch the rise again part. You got to stop with that. That's gonna turn everybody off. Nobody wants to hear that. Remember, we have the benefit of seeing the entirety of scriptures. They don't. And so don't go throwing rocks at Peter because he makes these statements. But he does need to learn, and he needs to be filled with the Spirit, and he needs to be in the right place. Look at how Jesus responds when Peter begins to rebuke him. Verse 33. But when he turned around and looked at his disciples, so here's what Peter says, and he turns around, and I can just see him sort of shaking his head as he's looking at his disciples like, you guys aren't getting it. He rebukes Peter, saying, get behind me, Satan. Ouch. Huh. As a follower of Christ, I want to make sure that I'm always a follower of Christ. He is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He's the great shepherd. Somebody once called me a sheepdog and said it's my job to keep the sheep close to the shepherd. But I see myself as nothing more than a very important sheep who is walking as close to Jesus as I can and making as much noise as I can about walking close to Jesus so other sheep will follow Jesus as well. That's my job. I shouldn't get ahead of the shepherd. I don't ever want to be somebody who demands that Jesus does something. Peter rebukes him and says, quit talking like that. And Jesus turns around and rebukes him and says, get thee behind me, Satan. Get behind me, Satan. Ouch. Ouch.
Whoa.
I am not about. I will pray and say, God, help us to have the churches reopened for assembly in the next couple of weeks. But not my will be done, thy will be done. You better believe I want his will to be done, not mine. Get behind me, Satan, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men. See, Peter is not thinking spiritually. He's thinking the other way. He's in the wrong place. When he had called the people to himself, with his disciples also, verse 34, he said to them, "Whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." When he had called the people to himself, so he deals with them, and then he brings people up and says, "I'm going to train." And he goes, "If you want to follow me, you have to deny yourself." What is Peter thinking? He's going to set himself up to be king. He's the Messiah. Peter, it's not what you want. You need to surrender. Folks, it's not what I want. I want to be surrendered. It's not what my desire should be, what my goal should be. I should be saying, I'm surrendered to Jesus in whatever he wants.
Amen.
Things are so much better when you surrender your life to him. You take up his cross. The cross of self-sacrifice that we see in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world wherein is excess, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Verse 35, for whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. Whoever desires to save his life will lose it. I give my life to him. He can do whatever he wants. Whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. It gives it away. Verse 36, for what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul?
Nothing.
Jesus tells the parable of the man who was very wealthy, and he had a great harvest. And so he said, I've got to tear down all my barns and build new barns. And so he did that and put everything away for the future. And he said, okay, I can eat, drink, and be merry because I've got it made. And the Bible tells us that that day, Jesus said that day, his soul was required of him. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? Wow. God can do so much better with my life than I can ever do.
Amen.
For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him the Son of Man also will be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. I don't want to deny Jesus. I want to live
Never.
for Jesus.
Never.
He is the one that died for me. He paid the ultimate price for me. And that's what I want to do. Thank you for joining me for the latter half of our Bible study tonight. I'm sorry that I had made a mistake and put it on the wrong place. I'm glad that maybe some of you are watching this and it will be online. I will make sure I share it back from my own personal Facebook account so that you can see it, the first part of it. And continue to be in prayer for our governor as he makes decisions regarding what's going to happen with churches. Folks, we are closed to assembling together, but we're not closed to preaching the gospel. We're not closed to living the Christian life. We're not closed to telling others about Jesus. We're not closed to prayer. We're not closed to reading our Bibles. We're still open to all of those things that churches do. We're just not assembling together. But pray that the governor will see fit to say, yes, you can assemble once together in the right way. And be in prayer for that. Let's bow our heads in a word of prayer and thank the Lord for what he's done. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for all the rich blessings that you give us. Help us to be willing because of salvation, because of our love for you, to surrender ourselves, to crucify ourselves, to pick up the cross daily. Lord, I don't want to lose you. I would rather lose everything I have and follow you than keep everything I have and not follow you. And I pray for those who are going to listen to this and watch this, that they might have the same attitude in their heart and in their mind. I want to live for Jesus Christ. I think of those who have given their lives around the world for the name of Jesus Christ. And Lord, they've gained heaven because of their sacrifice. They've gained rich rewards. I pray that we might have that same attitude. We might not think of ourselves first, but we might think of you first. Thank you for the answers to prayer that we talked about. Thank you for the prayer requests, and help us to always be good stewards of what we have been given to pray for. We ask this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you and good night.